mentioned in the, as we mentioned in the newsletter and in our publications, we live in a state that is dominated by one-party politics. So it's just, so many of our elected officials do not feel like they need to be accounted to even 40% of the voters, let's say 40 to 50% of the voters. So it really is increasingly important for us to show pushback on policies that don't align with our values and our progressive values, and support for those that do. So that's why today is so important, and we're thrilled to have, I think 75 signed up, and let's hope there a good many of them are here, and in addition to, and yeah, just hope they're able to join us. And I want to give a heads up about our March session as well. We're having another special Zoom lunch, another power lunch on March 14th, Tuesday, from noon to 1. And that is called Women Talking Reproductive Health Care in Alabama in 2023. As many of you are, we are concerned about the changing landscape for reproductive health care nationally, and in particular in Alabama, in the wake of the Dobbs versus Jackson Women Health Organization decision at the U.S. Supreme Court. We have 3 speakers so far. We may add another. We're casting a broad net on Women Talking, this particular panel, to look at reproductive health care overall, not just the termination of pregnancy or abortion, which was the focus of the Dobbs decision, the specific context of the Dobbs decision. But if you are familiar with that, you know that it really, because it was decided, because the original Roe decision was decided on pregnancy, the Dobbs decision essentially takes away pregnancy rights, reproductive rights, reproductive health care rights. So it's really much broader than abortion. So we're going to be looking at reproductive health care from ectopic pregnancy, emergency contraception, to a broad range of services that appear to be affected, either affected now or potentially affected by this decision, and think about what we may be able to do about that, so we can stay safe and keep our friends and family members and our patients and clients safe. So anyways, do mark Tuesday, March 14 on your calendar, and sign up, register today. You'll get a link as soon as you register, and then you'll get another link either the day before or the morning of the session, so you don't have to flounder around in your email and find that link. We'll get it to you. So, but do be sure to register. Dahlia Abrams, are you on? I was going to give, okay, all righty. If she gets on, let me know, because she did have a plug that she wanted to put in for. Dahlia is the co-leader of the Birthwell Partners Women's Community Doula, or Birthwell Partner Community Doula Project, and it is unique. One of a small, unique in Alabama, and one of a small group of community doula projects in the country, and has received a grant, a federal grant, in conjunction with the city of Birmingham, and is really is organizing events, I think, later this week in conjunction with them. So if you're interested in doulas and doula participation, in increasing participation in Central Alabama for pregnant people, let me know, and I can get you information on that. Okay, so we're going to start today with Dana Sweeney, who's the statewide organizer for Alabama Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. Dana, I'm going to give a little background on you, but can you just say hello, and we'll get you on. I think that will get you on the screen, your smiling face.
Yes, hello everybody. It's so good to be here.
Great, we're glad to have you back, Dana. Dana travels all across the state sharing Appleseed's research, building relationships, and connecting people with opportunities to take action to the fight for a better future. Dana has lived in Alabama his entire adult life and dreams of making this sweet home that we will all deserve. Alabama Appleseed is a member of the National Appleseed Network, which includes 18 Appleseed centers across the U.S. and Mexico City. Appleseed was founded in 1994 with the mission to develop and help sustain a network of advocacy centers that address local issues and develop and promote practical systemic solutions. And I think, Shannon, can we get that link in the chat, the link to the Appleseed connections? All righty, and what we are asking Dana and the speakers today to do is we're giving you 7-8 minutes to cover the top 3 to 5 issues and or bills that you see coming up in Montgomery that we need to be paying attention to. Take it away.
All right, terrific. And I've got my stopwatch, so I'm going to give you all the lightning round today. But so good to see everyone. I see many familiar faces and some new faces. For those who aren't familiar with Appleseed, we are a nonprofit organization that does policy research and advocacy at what I describe as a very important intersection in Alabama. So Alabama is one of the poorest states in the country, and we have some of the harshest criminal punishment laws in the country. And where those two realities crash together, that's where our work is. So a couple quick things I'll say up front about this upcoming legislative session. The first day of session is March 7th, so it's really sneaking up on us. And the other thing that's important to know is that because we just had elections in November, about a third of the entire state legislature is brand new people for whom this will be their first legislative session ever. So what that means is that for all of us on this call, we have a really good opportunity, I think, to make some good first impressions with lawmakers who are going to be new to the issues that we work on. Now, I think at Alabama Appleseed, on particularly criminal justice issues, we're expecting that advocates are probably going to have to play some defense this year, but we do see some really good opportunities as well. So I'm gonna speed through some of those just to hit the highlights before passing the torch. So the first area that we're spending a lot of time working on has to do with the incarceration of people over the age of 50 in Alabama. So as most folks on this call probably know, Alabama has a huge problem of mass incarceration. We incarcerate our residents at a rate higher than almost any other jurisdiction in the world. And as we look at who is in Alabama's prisons, a trend that we have noticed in the past 10 years or so has been the incredible growth of older Alabamians who are in our prisons. So from 2009 to 2019, we saw the number of young people in our prisons drop in half because of some really important reforms that were passed in sentencing in the middle of the decade. But at that same period of time, we saw the number of people 50 and above more than double. And it's in large part because those sentencing changes that passed were not retroactive. And so what we now have is a very, very large and growing cohort of Alabamians who are trapped in our prisons with basically no way out. And so one important piece of legislation that we're going to be working on this year would essentially create a pathway for some of these older Alabamians who are sentenced under these old sentencing guidelines that are no longer used to have the opportunity for a judge to re-examine their case, see if those folks might be able to be released in a way that preserves or maybe even improves public safety, because there's very little safety value in a lot of these folks who are, in many cases using walkers and wheelchairs remaining in prison. So that's one piece of legislation that we are going to be working really hard on to get some of these older folks the opportunity to come out of prison, and at the same time save the state a lot of money because it is very, very expensive to incarcerate Alabamians. And for every dollar we spend on that, we've got $1 less to spend on all of the other things that our state needs. So that's one, starting with the older folks. And then to flip it to the total other side of the age pyramid, another one of our priorities has to do with young people in Alabama. And specifically, it has to do with the system of juvenile fines and fees that Alabama currently has. So essentially, if you've got a kid under the age of 18, a legal minor, and they get into some trouble and they get pulled into, an interaction with the police, or if they have to go to juvenile court, basically when young people move through that system in Alabama, at every step, they are tagged with fines and fees that they have to repay to the state, or else there will be consequences for them and their family. And as I'm sure many of you on this call can imagine, 12-year-olds don't typically have a huge income. So it's a little, in our view, not very age appropriate in terms of a punishment. It's certainly not likely to lead to better outcomes for that child in the future. And most often, because kids can't pay these debts themselves, the burden is shifted to their parents, and it can create all sorts of collateral consequences in families who have children who come into contact with law enforcement. So the good news is that many other states have done away with juvenile fines and fees because it is not an age-appropriate tool, and Alabama could do the same. So we're going to be working with lawmakers on bipartisan legislation that would effectively end the system of juvenile fines and fees in the state. And then two more quick ones. I know I'm going really fast, but I want to make sure I save everybody's time. Two more quick ones. One, y'all may have heard of before, and it has to do with driver's licenses. Under current state law in Alabama, anyone who's unable to pay a fine or a fee or a traffic ticket has their driver's license automatically suspended. And that makes it really hard for people to get to a job, to make money to pay off those tickets. Makes it hard for people to get to church, school, doctor's appointments, wherever. And so it's a pretty harsh, nonsensical punishment. And here again, we have an example where many other states just don't do this, including southern states. And so we're working with lawmakers to see if we can get Alabama caught up so that people don't lose their driver's licenses for things that have nothing to do with road safety. And then the final priority that I'll just share with y'all before passing the torch has to do again with our prison and punishment system. And specifically, it has to do with reentry. So a lot of headlines were made in the past couple of weeks about folks who came out of Alabama's prisons due to a law that passed in 2021. And when those folks were released from prisons, under our current policy, they receive $10 and a bus ticket to the county where they were prosecuted, and that is it. And I'm sure everyone can imagine that that is not really a recipe for success, for people to be able to get back on their feet, find shelter, find a job, and sort of successfully re-enter our communities. And so one of the other things that we'll be working on is making sure that Alabama sets some money aside to invest in some housing in particular for folks who are coming out of prison as a transitional setting so that they can get back on their feet, because ultimately that makes our community safer when people coming out of prison have a roof over their heads and a place where they can get access to services and plug back in. So that is the lightning round of what Alabama Appleseed will be working on this session. And I will drop in the chat a way where you can keep up with us, get engaged. We'll make it easy for you to talk to lawmakers about these issues, take action, and learn more. So thank you for the invitation to be here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Golly, those all make so much sense. They make so much sense. I hope this is the year that the Alabama Legislature gets some sense. We are going to go next to Akiesha Anderson. Dana Ellis has asked to be placed last in the panel discussion, so we're going to move to Akiesha Anderson. Akiesha is a legislative and policy attorney and a registered lobbyist who serves as the policy and advocacy director for Alabama Arise. Akiesha, I should have asked you to say something so we can get your face on the screen.
Hi, you all.
Great,
yeah,
great.
Nice to be here today.
It's wonderful to see you again. Thank you. So anyway, she is the policy and advocacy director for Alabama Arise. Her work at Arise focuses on policy development, legislative drafting, policy advocacy, coalition building, and engaging with public officials. As a Montgomery native, Akiesha holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Alabama State University, a master's in public administration from Auburn University, Montgomery, and a law degree from the University of Alabama. Alabama Arise is a statewide member-led organization that advances public policies to improve the lives of Alabamians who are marginalized by poverty. Membership includes faith-based community, nonprofit, and civic groups, grassroots leaders, and individuals from across Alabama. So take it away, Akiesha.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me here today, you all. I am super excited to be joining you. I'm also excited to see some familiar faces, so thank you again for having me. Okay, and so I'm just going to talk briefly about Alabama Arise and some of our priorities this legislative session. And so thank you so much for already giving an overview of who Arise is and what we work on. But just in a nutshell, we work on issues that improve the lives of Alabamians who are marginalized by poverty. And so I love that we started off with Dana talking about the intersection of poverty and criminal justice. And so I'm going to talk about just what our issue priorities are this legislative session. We have a unique process in which our members decide our priorities every year. And so these 7 priorities on the screen are our priorities this legislative session. But going through the spirit of a lightning rod, I'm just going to touch on what, of these issue priorities, what I think we are going to see some movement and traction on, hopefully this legislative session. First, talking about tax reform. One of our big issue priorities is removing the state grocery tax. And so you all have noticed that when you go to the grocery store, you spend an extra 8 to 10% in addition to the cost of groceries when checking out. And that right now, as we are going through inflation, possibly entering a recession, that is something that is already a lot of burden on low-income Alabamians, but even worse right now during this tight economic situation. And so this is an area where we thankfully might be seeing some traction this year. It does seem to be an area where there is bipartisan support. One area where untaxing groceries has kind of hit the wall in the past has to do with replacing the revenue that is lost as a result of grocery taxes. This legislative session, there is an excess of revenue, or, we have a surplus of revenue in the general fund and education trust fund right now. And so there is some conversation just on both sides of the aisle of doing something to relieve the burden of grocery taxes for everyday Alabamians. We, however, are not trying to, tap into that excess revenue. We do have a revenue replacement plan in a bill that we'll be working with legislators to get introduced, to where we basically will remove a tax loophole for high earning Alabamians in exchange for, removing the grocery tax. And so that's something to be aware of and be on the lookout for this legislative session. When we talk about budgets, however, another area that, we're very much at the forefront of is working to get Medicaid expanded in Alabama. It is bizarre to me that for the last 3 years, we have been in the middle of a public health crisis, and just the urgency to do something about Medicaid expansion does not seem to be one that, has hit legislators or the governor hard enough. And so expanding Medicaid is definitely one of our top priorities this legislative session. And we do hope that we will see at least, a bill make it to committee and have some committee debate. That is something that has not happened in the past. And so expanding Medicaid is another issue area that is a priority for us this legislative session. And if you all have questions later, I can definitely answer this. But just so that you all know, right now there is a gap, a healthcare coverage gap, to where about 250,000 Alabamians make too much money to qualify for a state exchange or a federal exchange program for healthcare, but make too little money to qualify for Medicaid. And so that is close to 300,000 people that we are talking about getting healthcare coverage, ideally sooner rather than later. Also relate to funding, there is supposed to be a special session this legislative session to decide how to spend the rest of the ARPA funds. You all may recall the last special session on ARPA funds where it was decided to spend $400 million on prisons. So ridiculous, but it happened. This legislative session, if they do a special session to direct ARPA funding, we really do want to make sure that there is money set aside for public transportation, as well as money set aside for public housing, even if that looks like some pilot programs to get people adequate housing in different parts of the state. And so those are 2 areas that we are hoping we can weigh into the conversation about ARPA funding specifically. And then another area, the one that I'll end with, has to do with death penalty reform. And so death penalty reform as well as criminal justice reform are two separate issues on our agenda. But with death penalty reform, we are really thinking about, or we are working with Representative Chris England to try to get two bills passed. One will make a bill that he passed several years ago retroactive, which basically gets rid of the judicial override or a judge's ability to, override what the jury decides and sentence somebody to death, even though the jury hasn't decided that themselves. And another bill is one that has been introduced or pre-filed already this session, which will make it a requirement for there to be a unanimous jury decision. So everybody on the jury must agree to sentence somebody to death before somebody is sentenced to death. We are one of only a few states that does not require unanimous agreement before sentencing someone to death row or to the death penalty. And so that is a bill where we really do hope to see some traction this legislative session. A few other areas that I'll mention just honorably, even though, again, it's lightning round, but criminal justice reform, we are extremely supportive of the bill that Dana talked about with regard to ending the suspension or ending debt-based driver's license suspensions. And so that's something that we'll be keeping an eye out on and doing everything we can to help Appleseed get that over the finish line. And there's also a bill that will make or reinstate voting rights for people that have been disenfranchised previously. And so that's something that we're supportive of this legislative session as well. And we're working in coalition with others to help get through the finish line as well. But if anyone has any questions for me, this is my contact information. This is how you can find me. I will also put this into the chat, and that's the website for Alabama Rise if you want to learn more about our issues. But like Dana said, thank you so much for having me today. It's really great to be here, and I look forward to answering any questions y'all have.
Wow, this is a dream agenda. Thank you so much. We can only be hopeful on all of those measures. We're going to go next to Kathy Jones, and Kathy, can you say hello so we can get you on the screen? Kathy is president of the League of Women Voters of Alabama.
Hi there. This is Kathy Jones. Can you see
great.
me?
Great.
Right.
I'm going to just, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm going to say just a few words about you, Kathy, and then let you take it away. Kathy is, as I said, she's president of two boards with the League, the General Education and Fund Boards. General and Education Fund Boards. And Kathy is an Alabama native. She's originally from Birmingham. She worked as a spaceflight systems engineer and a project manager at NASA Marshall Flight Space Center in Huntsville until retiring in 2016. In the summer of 2017, with the guidance of the League of Women Voters of Alabama, Kathy established and was president of the Tennessee Valley Local League, as well as serving as its voter services director from 2017 to 2020. She served as secretary for 2019 and 2021. In her current position, Kathy says she considers herself fortunate to collaborate with amazing and strong people across Alabama who are dedicated to increasing the ability for everyone to vote and make their voices heard. So take it away, Kathy.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And I am really happy to be here. The League of Women Voters of Alabama has had an advocacy team now for about 3 years. We've always had an advocacy team, but it's been less integrated. We've been trying to bring in our local leagues to participate with us, to help us review bills that are being brought forward by the legislators to understand the impact. Some of them are not easy to get to what their intent is. One thing we are missing this year, there's not a whole lot of voting bills right now that have been dropped, and we're still waiting for those to hit. But we do see some that are out there that we're looking at and trying to understand, and we basically go in and try to understand, what is the intent. We look at it against our league positions, and I needed to just back up and just say that the League of Women Voters is a grassroots, bottoms-up organization. All the positions that the National League has have been voted on and at convention, and then we've got similar impact on positions at the state level. And so everything we do when we take positions for or against something, we have to go back and compare it to see, if it's supported by our official positions. So we've been doing that now for a couple of years, and you just start seeing the same bills. Some of the bad bills keep coming back until they pass. And it's been a real education. One of the things we're trying to do is to help people in the public see what's happening in Montgomery. And so we have this year, as a part of our efforts to do civic engagement, we have created the Alabama channel, which, if you've seen that mentioned in news articles, that is a project that's been totally driven by one of our members. We did get a grant from our national league that helped fund some of the software, but it's basically a labor of love, and it's a lot of work, but it's going to make a big difference to Alabama. And we think it's going to help people, like the folks on this call. We're going to help legislators keep track of what's happening, as well as the reporters and advocacy groups. So we feel like
is that a television channel or is it an online?
It's an online. I was going to drop the link to it in the chat.
Okay.
But it is a website where you can go if there are meetings that are live streamed, during the legislative session, as well as all year long, there are meetings happening in Montgomery that are live streamed, but Alabama does not record them. So they basically happen. If you don't catch it when it happens, you missed it. And so what we've done is recorded it, run it through a software that does a transcription, timestamp transcript, which is, really even though, we Alabama wasn't doing so good on transparency. I think this is basically taking us above a whole lot of other states who don't have this capability.
It's huge.
And, yeah, I think it'll make a difference. And we're looking forward to seeing the results of having this level of visibility in what's happening in Montgomery. Well, thank you. And we would love to, for people to go and watch what's happening when there's a bill that you care about. If you look at the agenda, you can go in and do a search at the Alabama channel on the word or the bill number and see what's happening.
Wow.
As far as our priorities, one of the things like Akiesha mentioned, we've been working with others to get this voting rights restoration bill passed. Last year, it almost passed. The session ended like 1 day too soon, or it would have passed. And so we expect it to come back this year. So far, it has not been pre-filed yet. There's a lot of other bills that we have not seen that we expect to see. And one of the things we like to do this year is to really emphasize the good bills that never get any oxygen. For example, every year there are early voting bills that are filed. Every year there are no excuse absentee. There's automatic voter registration. There are a lot of bills that are out there that would make voting easier, more just as secure, but easier for people to be able to participate in the election process. So we're looking for those, and we'd like to just basically make sure people are paying attention to the fact that they are filed, but no one ever has a hearing. They never pass it out of committee. It just goes into the campaign constitution and election committee and dies, because that's what that committee is good at, is to let bills go in and nothing happens. The other one that we're hearing right now, we've gotten, and here comes my train. I have a train that comes by whenever I have a meeting. But all right, so give me just a second. I'm at an intersection, so it blows its horn to go across.
Well, we believe in train safety, so that's great.
Yeah, I ought to go on mute so you don't have to hear it. But all right, I didn't want to try to talk over it. But one of the bills that we're hearing about, Representative Clark has reached out to the league about a bill that I'm excited about, the possibilities. It is looking at allowing you to designate someone to turn in your absentee ballot. And right now you can't. That's a real problem, because even if you are on your deathbed, you cannot allow someone to turn in your absentee ballot application or or your
Mhm.
absentee ballot. So we feel like this could be transformational. We're also looking at, we actually had a success before the session even began on open records, because the Sunshine Coalition, which the League is part of, had been working on a bill that would have clarified and required the state to respond to requests and to provide reasons if they're not going to provide it, and define cost. And so that our words for this bill that had been being worked through a committee, and Patricia Todd was coordinating it back with the Legislative Services Agency, was basically the same thing that Governor Ivey put in the executive order. So we feel like we claim success, but no one will tell us how she got it. So, but we're looking at possibly putting legislation in to get that bill actually codified, so it's not just not just someone's executive order. So
excellent.
I did want to mention one other priority is there are some bills out there, and I encourage you to go out to Allison and look at it. But there is a bill which doesn't stand a lot of chance of passing, but it's to repeal the misdemeanor for induced abortion. It's HB 17. I think it warrants us looking at it. The Divisive Concepts Bill is HB 7. That one is a repeat of last year, and it is a bill which would be a bad day for Alabama if that passes. And so you can go back and look at on Alabama Channel. You can go back and listen to the hearings in the Senate and the House. Very, very amazing testimony that was provided. That's going to need to happen again this year to keep that bill from passing.
Okay, and just to clarify, so the Divisive Concepts Bill HB 7 and the abortion changing the abortion law was HB 14?
17.
17, HB 7 and HB 17. Thank you.
Yeah, there are several other bills that'll be dropping that we need to pay attention to and understand their impact. We're also going to be looking at if ballot amendments pass, we need to start early, trying to understand what that is and to communicate with voters what the impact of that will be, because that will be on your ballot in 2024. And so we need to start making sure people understand that that is a direct pathway to having, it'll be red meat on the ballot, and it usually is. So you want to understand what it is.
And I can't, just a point of history, in 2018 was when we got the really highly restrictive anti-abortion bill, and
that was through the ballot.
Yeah, that came through at that point, and so yes, and we weren't. I personally was not paying attention to that ahead of time.
I think there were a lot of
what you're saying.
Yeah, I think folks are so focused on candidates, and they're saying, well, I support this candidate, I oppose this candidate. You don't read the ballot amendments, and that will affect your life longer. The politicians will be gone, and you'll still be living with this ballot amendment.
And we need to pay attention the year before they get on the ballot, and that is this year. So wow. This is an important heads up, and congratulations on the Alabama channel. That sounds like an amazing tool. We will be promoting that on both of our Facebook pages for sure.
Thank you so much, and I'll be ready to answer questions afterwards.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kathy. All righty, next we're going to go to Cindy Lowry. Cindy, who's Executive Director of the Alabama Rivers Alliance. Cindy, I'm going to introduce you. Can you say hello so we can get you on the screen? All righty, great. There's Cindy. The Alabama Rivers Alliance is a statewide environmental advocacy organization. Cindy joined the staff in 2005 as Watershed Leader Coordinator, was promoted to Executive Director in 2007. She's a native of Alabama, born and raised in Aniana. From a young age, she was taught the importance of civic engagement through activities such as campaigning for her father for city council. Amazing. And also being a page in the Alabama Legislature. You learned a lot there, I'm sure. Cindy received her BS degree in wildlife science from Auburn University and Masters of Public Administration from UAB. She has more than 20 years of experience in the conservation nonprofit sector as a variety of awards, such as Wonderful Outstanding Woman in the Metro Birmingham branch of the NAACP, named one of the women who shaped the state by AL.com in 2016, and Auburn University Alumni Spirit Award in 2017. There's more, but I'm going to let you get to your issues. Thank you so much, Cindy. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer, and HIVE and Mad. These are great groups, and this is a great group of people to be talking to and talking with. I'm also currently the board president of the Greater Birmingham League of Women Voters chapter, so very familiar with League of Women Voters work, and was former board member of Alabama Rise, so I feel right at home with this group and love all the work that everyone is doing and that I'm hearing about. I'm going to steal a little bit of Dana's description of their organization because I thought it was really good. We at the Alabama Rivers Alliance do policy research and advocacy around the intersection of water and people and pollution. And we have over 132,000 miles of rivers and streams in Alabama. So there's a lot of water. And we do have, unfortunately, a bit of a hurdle to get over the idea that somehow jobs and industry are at odds with protecting our waterways, and so we kind of work in that intersection and try to make sure that we're overcoming that myth and seeing if we can balance it all out. So in the legislative arena, we are a little bit more novice than some of the groups you've heard here that have been working in the legislative arena for decades. Our community, our environmental activist groups have mostly focused on regulatory, like Alabama Department of Environmental Management and EPA, areas like that. But we have been engaging with the legislature at the Rivers Alliance for several years now. And we kind of came in with trying to score a touchdown on the first drive. And we realize now, and especially with the opportunity that Dana also mentioned and others have mentioned of the new quadrennium and a third of the legislature being brand new, we are really trying to kind of take a step back and build relationships and learn who these folks are and let them learn who we are and try to meet them where they are on some of these issues. We are fortunate in the rivers world and the water and conservation world that our issues do affect many legislators and many legislators districts. So many of them fish, many of them recreate on their waterways. And so we do have some common ground where we can talk to these folks and get them to understand the concerns. So that's where we're starting this year. And we have been pretty good in the environmental community at playing defense. We haven't seen anything alarming so far this year with regards to defensive legislation. So I'm going to focus on our kind of plans for some offense this year. And one of the things that we're excited to see happening at the executive level, the governor is very interested in outdoor recreation. There's an innovation commission that she did over the last several years has decided that there's a couple of ways we can get high quality workers to come into the state and high quality jobs in the state. And one of those is by promoting the resources that we have for outdoor recreation. So that's an area where we want to engage there's some legislators on Outdoor Recreation Council. And so we want to engage with them on some of our issues. One being, how do we want people to come and recreate. We want them to fall in love with our waterways as we have, but we also want that to be done safely, and we want the health of the folks that are recreating to be taken into consideration, and we want transparency on where it's safe to recreate. So one of the issues we're really looking at that we've been working on for several years in non-legislative ways is fishers' right to know. We have fish consumption advisories all over the state and almost all of our waterways for various pollutants. And it makes the fish not safe to eat. Many fish, not all fish, and there's certain fish that are safe to eat in certain amounts. So this is a program that's conducted by 3 state agencies: the Department of Health, the Department of Environmental Management, and the Department of Conservation are all involved. and it's a voluntary program that they operate, so it's not codified in law. And it's a report gets put out every year with these consumption advisories. And it's a pretty dense report. It goes out on the internet, on their health department website, but it's not, really accessible information. So we're hoping that we can work with our legislators this year to make this program codified, to make it more of a invest in this program for our state, and to make the information more accessible to people out there recreating, and particularly to folks that are fishing for their families, their children, and their food, which is done a lot in this state. There's actually studies that have shown that we fish and eat the fish more in Alabama than in other places. So we're working with Conservation Alabama, another conservation group in the state, our League of Conservation Boater affiliate in Alabama, as well as Coosa Riverkeeper, who's been leading this effort for many years. And so we'll keep y'all posted on that legislation. We don't have a bill yet, but we're working on that. We're meeting with a lot of legislators to discuss it. And so that's one thing that we're looking at.
And I'm glad to hear that the governor is on board with that.
Well, we haven't talked to the governor about the actual legislation yet, but the governor is supporting the idea of outdoor recreation. So
okay,
we're kind of focusing on where do we meet these folks at that outdoor recreation intersection, because that's the common ground that we all have. So we will be meeting hopefully with the governor and getting her support, or the support of folks in her administration, but we haven't done that yet. The other thing that we're looking at is we've been following the wastewater infrastructure funding that's come in from the federal government. Most of the funding that is going through ADEM, the Department of Environmental Management, through a program they already have in existence called the State Revolving Loan Fund program. But the problem there that we've seen is that funding, that program does not allow for money to go to individuals. It can't go to septic systems. And that is one of the major problems that we all have seen in the Black Belt, is that so many homes are either straight piping or they have septic systems that are failing. And there's some really great folks working in the Black Belt trying to solve these problems with new technologies. We're engaging with them and learning from them on what they're trying to do. But they need more funding, and unfortunately the funding that is coming from the infrastructure bill through the ADEM process is only can go to utilities and local governments, which means it's mostly pretty much all going to centralized talent systems, like the big systems that have a lot of people on them. There are challenges in the Black Belt with those as well, and ADEM has been getting funding to those centralized systems, so I don't want to say the picture's all bad. But we think that the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, are a place where we can get. There were some funds put towards sewer last time the last session when they had a special session about this. We would like to see more funds going toward sewer work, specifically towards those problems where people have specific individual systems. So how can we get that money to into nonprofits or entities or individuals that really can help solve these problems in the Black Belt? So that's one thing we'll be advocating for around the American Rescue Plan Act dollars as those get decided on. I will give a shout out to Arise and their public transit efforts as well. We are certainly supportive of that. Our transportation emissions are a huge driver of climate change, and we need to curb those. And one of the avenues for that is to have better public transit in our state. And so we also support their efforts to advocate for funding for public transit. The last thing I'll say that we're probably going to be looking at on an offensive standpoint is forever chemicals. You guys have probably heard of these. This is PFOAs, PFASs that come out of many industries in the state. We are learning more and more about these chemicals as EPA puts out more guidance and more information to states. The regulations are way behind the concerns. So the federal government and EPA are working through some ways to better regulate these, but in the meantime, it's in all of our waterways. These are the chemicals that came out of the most famous, I guess in Alabama, are the 3M, is the 3M industry, nonstick cookware. It's in fast food wrappers, it's in pizza boxes, it's in so many aspects of our lives. And 3M has thankfully said they're no longer going to produce these chemicals, so that's good. But they're called forever chemicals for a reason. Once they're in our waterways, they do not get out. They stay in our environment, in our soils.
Wow.
They can't they don't dilute and sort of dilute themselves out like a lot of different pollutants will. They stay in there. So getting them cleaned up and getting them regulated from all the industries. So we're learning there in other types of industries such as paper mills and in a lot of other industrial sources. So they're in a lot of waterways in Alabama, not just in the Tennessee River. They're in the Coosa River, they're in the Alabama River. And we are probably, this will be a starter year for this issue, looking at what is something that we can do in Alabama that will help us to start to regulate these, to start to monitor and understand these better while that we're waiting for the federal government regulations to play out, to come into fruition, because it's taking a long time and we need to be being proactive on this front. And ADEM has been doing some testing and monitoring for this. They're required to do some. Drinking water supplies are also required to know about it. So we're just looking into what is the best avenue that we can maybe get a step forward on regulating these in Alabama. And so we'll keep y'all posted on that. Again, no bill numbers yet, but we will let you know when we have them. And the main thing we're doing is trying to build relationships. And what we know is that we don't have champions in our legislature for environmental issues. So on either party, and that's, not that they wouldn't, they just we need to have relationships, and we need to have constituents out there telling their legislators that these are issues that are important to them. So we're working really hard with our membership and our supporters, and we hope all of you will help us in making sure when you're talking to your legislators about all of these important issues, you're also letting them know that water is important, and that we need access to water, we need clean water, we need public health, healthy river systems, because that's where we get most of our drinking water from. So we appreciate all the support we can get on that front.
Yeah, wow. I'm glad you guys are on the job. Lots of challenges, but I feel a little better because you're on the job. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, last but not least, we're going to go to Dana Ellis. Dana, can you say hello? And I'll introduce you. As you can see from her t-shirt, Dana is with the Alabama chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. She is the city gun violence lead in Birmingham. Dana is a native of Tennessee and a veteran of the U.S. Army Nurse Corps. She was recruited to UAB Hospital in 1980 and retired in 2018. As a registered nurse, she has seen the effects of gun violence many times over. In 2013, Dana became a volunteer for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, and shortly after its formation, she's been a former Alabama chapter, and she continues to work today in Alabama to ensure that fewer of our citizens are harmed by the epidemic of gun violence in our state and in our nation. I think everybody is familiar with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense nationally. So Dana, take it away and let's talk about what's top of mind for you as the legislature convenes.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I wanted to say how honored I am to be on a panel with such distinguished people that have already spoken. I asked to go last because we are working behind the scenes on a potential bill, but it is not yet been finalized nor have a number. So I didn't want to take time away from others who knew what bills they were already pushing. But let me, in the interest of time, explain what we're trying to do. We know that 110 Americans die each day from gun violence. And for every death, there's 2 to 3 injuries. So there are many people walking around this country who've been traumatized by gun violence. I'm posting an article in the chat, a recent one from AL.com, which kind of surprised me. Nationally, the number of gun deaths, suicides represent roughly 2/3 of gun deaths, and all other causes amount to the rest. However, and that has been true in Alabama, the last data showed that 52% of our gun deaths were suicides. But unfortunately, the CDC just released data, and now homicides outpace suicides in the state of Alabama. We have the 5th highest rate of gun violence compared to all of the other states. We rank 3rd compared to other states in homicides and 12th in suicides. So we clearly have a gun violence issue in the state. Many people, if you delve into this work, and I don't want to, I assume a lot of people on the call already know a lot of what I'm saying, so please forgive me if you do, but we know that we have a public health crisis in terms of gun violence, and therefore the best approach is a public health approach. There are many ways to get this work done, to include street outreach workers, cure violence, community gun violence interventions, hospital-based violence intervention programs. I am so excited to let y'all know that after years of work, UAB has just started a hospital-based violence intervention program.
Wow.
They have partnered with a community-based organization, the Offender Alumni Association, who has hired the people who will approach individuals while they're hospitalized in the hospital to say, are you ready to get out of the cycle of violence? And for those individuals who are, they will have 6 to 12 months of intensive case management. Identify the needs of the individual and meet those needs so that someone can get out of the cycle of violence. In other cities that have implemented such programs, you've seen homicide rates fall. It varies by state in terms of how much they've fallen. But since we know that 30% of homicides are retaliatory in nature, in other words, I'm shot and either I or a family member go to retaliate against my shooter. Well, if you can intervene and give me the help I need to break out of this cycle, then I am less likely to retaliate. So while the program is just starting and it will be small in the beginning, I do fully expect to see a decrease in the homicide rate, not immediately, please hear me say that, but over time because of this work. So a bill that is being worked on behind the scenes, I hope will be introduced this year, is to provide funding for a statewide office of public safety that will fund programs like HVIPs, like street outreach workers, like community violence intervention programs throughout the state. We know we're the 5th highest state with gun violence, so we obviously need this help. If and when the bill is introduced, I'll certainly get it to Jennifer so that she can spread the word. But we've got to do this. I mean, there are proven approaches that deserve funding. When the American Rescue Plan Act was finalized, gun violence intervention was stated in the rules as one of the appropriate uses for this funding. Since we've used some of our allocation already to build prisons, hopefully we can use some of the funding to do something that will truly help the citizens of the state of Alabama. The other thing I wanted to mention, last year, we were all very disappointed to see permitless carry passed in the legislature. After being defeated for 7 years in a row, it finally passed. And what this bill means is that prior to January 1st of this year, to legally carry a concealed weapon, you had to apply for a permit at your local sheriff's office. This permit included a background check and any knowledge the sheriff might have of issues with you. And so if you were caught with a concealed carry weapon without a permit, there were penalties to that. That is all gone now. Now, a lot of people say, well, does that really matter? Because you have to get a background check to buy a gun. Yes, it matters, because you don't in Alabama. If you buy your gun at a gun show, or if it's a private sale, there is no background check to that. Or if you buy your gun in 2010 and commit a violent crime in 2013, you still own that gun and you can carry it concealed. So our legislature last year did something that's almost beyond belief. They decreased our safety, because in states which have passed permitless carry, you've seen a 13 to 15% increase in violent crimes following that legislation. So not only did they decrease our public safety, they defunded law enforcement. And what I mean by that is the fees for concealed carry permits were used by the sheriffs to provide training, to provide extra equipment, things that the sheriffs needed. That money is rapidly going away. Now, some people will still buy concealed carry permits because they travel to other states that have these laws. So I'm not telling you the revenue has gone to zero, but it is already, there were 5 counties that totaled, and they've already seen a $1 million increase among those, decrease among those 5 counties. What the legislature did to try to offset this is they established a grant program. $2 million a year can be given to the sheriffs to offset revenue, but that's for the whole state. And if 5 counties have already seen a $1 million decrease, you know we're not going to refund the sheriffs. More importantly, for the sheriffs and other law enforcement officers, this legislation makes their job even more dangerous. I talk about it because even though it's a done deal, I know that the people on this call are not unfamiliar with talking with their legislatures. And I do think it makes perfect sense for any time you're talking with them to let them know that you are concerned about your public safety, that you think this law is egregious and it should be repealed. Whew. Jennifer, I've talked quickly because I'm cognizant of time, but I'm willing to answer any questions.
Wow. Well, you hit the high points and given us our marching orders, Dana. We appreciate that. I'm not even, well, I mean, just given what has been happening with mass shootings in this country this year, I think there's a hyper awareness over it. Although, as you point out, much of gun violence is not mass shooting; it's person-to-person violence, which is just equally tragic. But anyways, thank you so much. I think you've given us a great overview, and I want to thank all of our panelists: Dana Ellis, Dana Sweeney, Akiesha Anderson, Kathy Jones, and Cindy Lowry. Today, this has been a great session. Please do keep me in the loop, and any big bill that's coming your way, shoot it, email it to us, and we will circulate it in our newsletters and get it on our Facebook pages and promote as much as we can the citizen lobbying effort that you need to get the good bills passed and the bad bills stopped. Before we sign off, I do want to mention again our session on March 14th, Women Talking Reproductive Health Care in Alabama. 2023, we're going to have Michelle Browder, artist, activist, history teller. Michelle is the creators of the Mothers of Gynecology Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. That's an astonishing story. If you haven't heard it, you do want to join us. Also be joining us with Dr. Jasana Cooper, leading OBGYN and safer birth advocate in the country, and Dr. Samantha Hill, board certified pediatrician in adolescent medicine in Birmingham, Alabama, all leaders in their respective fields to help us look at the changing landscape for reproductive health care in this state. So we're going to sign off. I'm sorry that we did not have time for Q&A, but do pass your questions on to us via email, and we will get them out to the speakers or contact them directly. So thank you all. Megan, any comments? Megan Shannon?
No, thank you. I stuck the Facebook event for the March panel in the chat, and I just want to say thank you to all these rock stars. Again, this is this shining stars who give you hope that even in Alabama, good things are happening. And so we thank all of you. Thank you. Y'all make me feel better about life and goodness and all that. So thanks so much.
Yeah, we're betting on democracy and you folks. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you, Shannon, for running our chat, and thank you, Kristen, for helping us organize this fabulous panel. So we'll see you on Tuesday, March 14th, we hope. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.